Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment.
What happens when one of the most respected actors in cinema history sits down for what should be a simple promotional interview and discovers that the person across from him couldn't be bothered to learn even the most basic facts about his 4-decade career? What you're about to witness isn't just another awkward celebrity moment. This is the story of how Michael Strahan's ego and laziness collided with Denzel Washington's legendary professionalism, creating one of the most jaw-dropping walkouts in live television history. This is the moment that exposed the difference between celebrity and true excellence. This is the interview that became a masterclass in dignity and self-respect. This is the confrontation, where a Hollywood legend taught a morning show host an unforgettable lesson about preparation, respect, and the consequences of wasting someone's time. And this is the day that Michael Strahan learned that not everyone will tolerate being disrespected on national television. The Tuesday morning began like countless others at the Good Morning America studios in New York City. Dawn light filtered through the towering windows overlooking Times Square, casting long shadows across the familiar set where millions of Americans started their day. Production assistants moved through their well-rehearsed routines, adjusting lighting rigs and testing camera angles with the practiced efficiency of people who had orchestrated hundreds of these segments before. The energy in the building carried a particular buzz of excitement. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear as a guest, and that was always a major get for any show. 2 Academy Awards, 10 Oscar nominations, decades of iconic performances that had defined entire generations of cinema. Movies that had grossed billions worldwide and earned critical acclaim that few actors in history could match. Having Denzel Washington on your show was a privilege, an opportunity, a chance to create meaningful television. Michael Strahan sat in his chair reviewing his notes, or at least, that's what it looked like from a distance. The former NFL star turned television personality had built a successful career on his charisma and easy charm, his ability to connect with guests through casual conversation, and that signature gap-toothed smile that audiences had come to love. He'd interviewed countless celebrities, hosted major events, become a recognizable face in American media. But those who worked closely with him on this particular morning might have noticed something troubling. The way he glanced at his notes seemed perfunctory, distracted. The briefing materials his producers had prepared sat largely unread. He appeared confident, comfortable, ready to rely on the same formula that had worked for him hundreds of times before. Wing it. Keep it light. Let his personality carry the conversation. What Strahan didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly understand in his comfortable bubble of morning show success, was that Denzel Washington was not the kind of guest where that approach would work. Denzel had been doing interviews since before Strahan played his first professional football game. He'd sat across from the best journalists in the world, engaged in thoughtful conversations about craft and art and the responsibility of storytelling. He could tell within 30 seconds whether someone had done their homework or was just going through the motions. And Michael Strahan had very clearly not done his homework. The audience filed into the studio with palpable excitement, their faces bright with anticipation. Many of them had grown up watching Denzel's films, had been inspired by his performances, had come hoping to hear insights from a true master of the craft. They settled into their seats, phones silenced, ready to witness what they expected would be a fascinating conversation between 2 successful men at the top of their respective fields. The makeup artists made their final adjustments backstage. Sound engineers ran through their checks one last time. Cameras were positioned perfectly to capture every angle. Everything was ready. Everything except, as it would turn out, the host himself. When Denzel finally made his entrance, the studio erupted in applause. He moved with that characteristic grace and dignity that had become his hallmark, waving to the audience with genuine warmth. At 68 years old, he carried himself with the bearing of someone who had earned every accolade, every bit of respect, every moment of admiration. His suit was impeccable. His presence commanded the room without demanding it. Strahan rose to greet him with that famous smile, shaking his hand with enthusiasm, gesturing to the guest chair with the confidence of someone who believed this would be just another successful segment. They exchanged pleasantries as Denzel settled in, the audience still buzzing with excitement, completely unaware that they were about to witness something unprecedented. The cameras rolled. The segment began. And within the first 30 seconds, everyone who was paying attention knew something was about to go very, very wrong. So, Denzel, Strahan began, leaning back in his chair with casual confidence, that signature smile still in place. "I got to ask you about this new movie of yours. I mean, another drama, another serious role. Don't you ever get tired of playing the same type of character over and over again?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. To the casual viewer, it might have seemed like an innocuous opening, maybe even a reasonable question. But to anyone who knew anything about Denzel Washington's career, to anyone who had spent even 10 minutes researching his filmography, the question revealed something deeply problematic. Michael Strahan had no idea who he was talking to. Denzel's expression shifted subtly, his eyebrows raised just a fraction of an inch, his lips pressed together slightly. He'd been in this business for 4 decades, had sat through thousands of interviews, had handled every kind of question imaginable. But something about the way Strahan phrased this particular question, something about the casual dismissiveness in his tone, immediately put him on alert. "I'm sorry," Denzel said, his voice calm but carrying an underlying tension that anyone truly listening would catch. "What do you mean by that?" Strahan chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, to the warning sign that had just been posted. "Come on, man. You know what I mean. The serious guy, the mentor figure, the wise character who teaches everyone lessons. It's like you're stuck in this box, you know? When's the last time we saw you do something fun, something light?" The words landed with all the grace of a sledgehammer. Several audience members exchanged confused glances. The producers behind the cameras began to look concerned. But Strahan, riding high on his own confidence, seemed completely unaware that he'd just insulted one of the greatest actors of all time by suggesting his career lacked range. Denzel sat back in his chair, his hands clasping together with deliberate control. The camera captured the subtle change in his posture, the way his entire energy shifted from friendly guest to something more guarded, more careful. "Michael," he said, and there was something in the way he said the name that should have been a warning. "I've done comedies. I've done action films. I've done Shakespeare on stage. I think if you actually looked at my body of work, you'd see quite a range." It was a gentle correction, a polite way of pointing out that Strahan's premise was fundamentally flawed. A smart host would have taken the hint, acknowledged the error, and redirected. But Michael Strahan was apparently not that smart host. "Yeah, but come on," Strahan continued, his tone becoming more dismissive, more certain of his own position. "Most people know you for the same type of role. Training Day, Man on Fire, The Equalizer. It's all the same energy, isn't it?" The studio audience started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. A murmur of confusion rippled through the rows. People who had come to hear Denzel discuss his craft were instead watching their host argue with him about his own career. The producers behind the cameras were exchanging increasingly worried glances, but there was no commercial break scheduled, no easy way to cut away from what was rapidly becoming a disaster. Denzel leaned forward slightly, and anyone who knew him, anyone familiar with his work and his presence, would have recognized this as a very bad sign. When Denzel Washington got quiet and leaned forward, something significant was about to happen. "Michael," he said, his voice measured and precise, "have you actually watched my films? Because what you're describing doesn't sound like someone who's familiar with my actual work." Strahan laughed it off with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed he was in control of this conversation. He waved his hand dismissively, as if Denzel's concern was nothing more than professional vanity. "Of course I've seen your movies, man. I'm just saying, from an audience perspective, you know, when people think Denzel Washington, they think serious, intense guy. Maybe it's time to shake things up a bit." "Shake things up," Denzel repeated slowly, his voice getting quieter, and anyone who truly understood him knew that the quieter his voice got, the more dangerous the situation was becoming. "And what would you suggest I do to, as you put it, shake things up?" "I don't know," Strahan said with a shrug, as if he were discussing something trivial. "Maybe try some comedy. Do a romantic comedy or something. Show people you can be funny. You know, loosen up a little bit." The condescending tone was now impossible to miss. What had started as an awkward question was evolving rapidly into something much more problematic, much more disrespectful. The studio audience was beginning to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary, and not in a good way. Denzel's jaw tightened, just barely, just enough for the cameras to catch it. "Michael, I've been acting since before you started playing football. I've won 2 Academy Awards. I've been nominated for 10. I've performed on Broadway. I've directed films that have been critically acclaimed and commercially successful. What exactly are you trying to say here? Strahan seemed to sense he'd walked into something, but instead of backing down gracefully, instead of acknowledging his error and moving forward, he did what his ego apparently wouldn't let him avoid. He doubled down. "Hey, I'm not trying to attack you or anything," he said, his voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. "I'm just having a conversation. This is what interviews are about, right? Asking the tough questions." The words "tough questions" seemed to echo in the studio. Denzel stared at him for a long moment, and you could practically see him making a decision, crossing some internal threshold. "Tough questions," he repeated, and there was something in his tone now that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "Michael, a tough question would be about my preparation process, about my thoughts on the current state of cinema, about the themes I'm exploring in my upcoming projects. What you're doing is making assumptions about my career based on what sounds like a very surface-level understanding of my work." Strahan's smile faltered for just a moment, a crack appearing in his confident facade. But he quickly recovered, falling back on his television training, that ability to smooth over awkward moments with charm and deflection. "Look, I think you're taking this a little too seriously. We're just having a casual conversation here." "Casual," Denzel repeated, and the single word carried more weight than entire paragraphs could have. "So when you have actors on your show, this is how you prepare? You just wing it and hope for the best?" The question hit harder than Strahan had expected. It wasn't just a pushback anymore. It was a direct challenge to his professionalism, his credibility as a host. His media training kicked in automatically, and he tried to laugh it off with that signature smile. "Come on, Denzel. You know that's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Michael?" Denzel's voice was steady, controlled, but carrying an edge that could cut steel. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you didn't bother to do any research about the person you're